Hello, hello, hello. I am here with Devon Hayes, the TEDx organizer of TEDx Billings, and I am not going to introduce him myself. I'm going to let him introduce himself. Not going to take his thunder. We're going to ask him some questions, and we'll get into that in a second. But Devon, floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate you inviting me on your podcast. As we were kind of chit-chatting before the start, I let you know that this is the first podcast I've actually done with somebody that I didn't know previously heading into it. So this should be fun. I'm not going to toot my horn a whole bunch, but as you said, I'm the lead organizer for TEDx Billings here in Billings, Montana, and I've been serving in that capacity for going on 4 years now. Next year will be 4 years. And it's been a wild ride, one that's been super fun and fulfilling, and the future looks bright for TEDx Billings. So I'm excited to continue that moving into the future.
I wasn't aware you've been doing this for 4 years. That's pretty cool. If you're thinking 4 years back, it's 2023 right now. You started in 2019, is that right? If that's how the math works out.
I first applied for the license in like January of 2020,
Oh wow, cool.
which was a fun year.
Yeah, right. And so, what you know, I know there's always for the TEDx speakers, right? There's always a lot of thoughts going through their head of, do I apply for this TED Talk? Do I submit this? Does this work for me? Am I even a TEDx speaker? I know I had a huge imposter syndrome the first time, but I can only imagine that it's probably even stronger, or you're more certain as a TEDx organizer. So the question is, what did that decision look like? To go in and say like, hey, you know what, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna start TEDx Billings. I'm gonna be, one of the go-to TEDx talks in all the state of Montana. What kind of went through you behind that decision? What did that look like for you?
Honestly, it wasn't really anything other than just my involvement with the community up to that point that kind of led me to the decision. Also, Montana is a state where we are still very competitive with the other communities around the state. And I had heard that Bozeman, which is a community about 2 hours away from us, was going to have their own TEDx event. And of course, being a person who watched TEDx talks and TED Talks the majority of my life, I was interested in potentially attending that event. The more I looked into attending that particular event, the more curious I got as to why Billings was not slated to have a TEDx event. And of course, the way my mind works, I when I get curious, I can't let it go. I just keep researching and come to find out that the license for TEDx Billings was available and nobody was currently planning one. So at that point, I did what anybody would do. And I posted a Facebook status just asking, hey, if I tried to bring TEDx to Billings, who would want to help? Turned out there was quite a few people who raised their hands as wanting to help, and two friends in particular who had already been talking about it between the two of them. So we decided to meet, the three of us, and discuss our strengths and the opportunity just in general, whether or not we should pursue it. And turns out we all three had very different strengths and you know vital strengths to really making a TEDx event successful. So we decided to team up and submit our application. That was in January of 2020 when we submitted that. So I was super involved with the Chamber of Commerce and different business professional networking groups here in town. So I already had that base knowledge that we have some incredible people doing really amazing things, not just here in Billings, but across the state, across the country, across the world. And so knowing that, you coupled that with the fact that I'm competitive with Bozeman, it was a recipe to create something special, which I think we've done.
That's beautiful. It's cool to see what can happen from a healthy rivalry like that, and all the beautiful impact that sounds like has come from the 4 years you've been doing this. For that, and talking to a few other TEDx organizers, what I'm tending to see is you go through the same thing that you go through when you start a business, right? The uninformed optimism, then the valley of death. You're like, oh my gosh, this is actually really hard, and then the trough of sorrow or whatever it's called, and then you come out and it's like, oh, I did this. It's pretty cool. And then you have all the TEDx speakers that you actually gave them the platform to kind of go and actually speak and share their idea or spreading and however they choose to communicate that. For you, what did that journey look like?
Oh gosh, clarify your question for me because you kind of said a lot leading up to that.
What did you when you first had that vision to
Yeah.
choose to start that TEDx talk, TEDx Billings?
Hmm.
How did that vision differ from the reality of what ended up happening for the past 4 years?
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. There is a lot of uninformed optimism initially, just like anything else, just like when you launch your business for the first time. Very similar in that way. And you're also right in the sense that I didn't really know what I got myself into, and then there was moments along the way of realization of, how real this is and how much it means to me and how much it means to the speakers and just the community that everything goes right. And so there's, an inherent kind of amount of pressure that's applied that you don't really think about when you just set out to throw the event. So all of that is true, but it's all made up for tenfold in the day of the event when that happens. And the energy in the room is electric because of the ideas that are being shared and the people in the community that is there in the room experience it all. You know, once the event takes place, kind of all of those stresses and worries and just problems kind of just melt away because you realize how worth it was. And so that's why I continue to do it. But you're absolutely right. There's a whole bunch of uninformed optimism initially, especially when you're trying to do it in the fashion that we are. We're not just doing it to be some event that happens periodically and puts out okay content and goes to okay destinations and doesn't use the best video and audio and all of those things. We're really trying to do it top tier. And so when you set out to do things that way, there's some things that'll come up along the way that you didn't maybe foresee.
Of course. And for you mentioned earlier that you had this network of people at the Chamber of Commerce and a bunch of people that were around you that you knew, wow, they have powerful ideas that if they had a stage or a microphone to amplify those ideas, that those ideas could be very impactful to whoever they may be impactful to. What does that journey look like for you as a TEDx organizer of finding the people and those ideas that those finding the ideas and the people those ideas are in? Actually, I think is a better way to say it because you choose the idea first. Is that right before the person?
Yes, that would be correct. I would say that initially for our first event, it was a lot of sourcing, just my team's connections to find presenters. We of course had an application process available, and there was a good majority that were submitted that way. I would say our first event, probably half were people who applied that had found that we were having an event either on the TED website or through our platforms. And then the other half were people that we invited just based off of previous knowledge or what about that person. And so that's kind of how it was the first event. Now we've changed that heading. We changed that heading into our second event. We did application only, and we got, I think, around 60 applications, which was pretty decent for us, being that we only take 16 presenters. And this year we received well over 100 applications. And so to go from where we started initially to where we are now, it's been a lot of working our connections and just continuously talking about the TEDx mission when we're out and about in the community. I've got a really solid team that is really passionate about the mission that we have here at TEDx Billings. But we also partner with community organizations like you mentioned, the Billings Chamber of Commerce, the Big Sky Economic Development Association, the school districts and the universities here in town are partners of ours. So we post literature and give them updates constantly. And it's just gotten to a point where hopefully, at least my goal is to get this thing to a point where truly anybody in Billings believes that they could be a TEDx speaker if they so chose to do so. I truly believe that anybody could do it. It's just a matter of are you willing to put in the work, I guess? Because everybody's got a story, everybody's got a message, and everybody's message is worthy of being heard, and everybody's message will resonate with somebody else out there. And so it's just a matter of, does that person have the will? And so hopefully we get to a point where everybody knows that this is a platform that's available, and that if they've got the willpower or just the determination to set out to do it, that they could apply and potentially be chosen.
Hmm. I completely agree, and I talk to a lot of people about this. I say, I genuinely believe that every single person on this planet has a TEDx idea worth spreading in them. Sometimes they just need a little bit of help to actually find that idea that is already within them. So, given you're a TEDx organizer and you have that same belief, it seems like, what message do you have for that person that is in Montana or wherever they, come from, whoever is listening, right? That has an idea, doesn't realize they have an idea, and doesn't even think they could give a TEDx talk, right? They have that big time imposter syndrome, just as I had before I gave my first one, so I completely understand it. What is the message you have to that person that, if they are just courageous enough to apply or get out there and share their idea, that it could set a lot of different things in motion for them, their life, and then the lives of all the other people that actually touch from that idea?
I don't know that I would say much else other than you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so if you always live your life not taking those shots, you're going to miss out on a ton. And if it's something you've even contemplated for a second as you watch TED Talks or TEDx Talks online, and you're like, man, that would be cool. You know, if you've ever just thought that for a split second, I think you should explore that a little bit more. A lot of people's anxiety around it comes from they feel like they need to memorize their talks, which a lot of the more dynamic talks do seem to be memorized, but that's not always the case either. And it's not always the most polished presenter that gets the most views online. It truly is the idea, the story that matters. And anybody could deliver, one of those next ones that goes viral. So question is, are you going to take the chance on it being you, or are you going to sit on the sidelines?
Love it. And that kind of balance between, and me personally, I am genuinely curious about this as well. What is that balance between the idea we're spreading and the story that is on the back end to, I guess, function as evidence to help people understand that idea? Where does that kind of balance set for you as an organizer when you're making the decision of who to accept to come on your stage?
It's really different for everybody. I don't know that there's a particular formula or balance that we necessarily use. We really focus heavily on the idea and the evidence, and that they have to back up that idea or the effort that they've put into conveying that idea through the application process in the selections. And then once we've selected somebody, we work very closely with them for, 9, 10 months leading up to when they would actually deliver their talk. And so the talk that somebody submits is likely a bit different than the one that actually gets delivered based on all the training and things that happen. So I don't know that there's an exact balance. I think it's different for everybody. And so we try to help our people find that along the way.
And what does that journey look like for the speaker that they were courageous enough to submit the idea and the story and submit the application and make that decision, even take that step, which you could argue is one of the hardest steps of the entire journey? Um, how do you take them from that idea and that submission of that application through the kind of journey that they take of being accepted, I guess, massaging and nurturing their idea and their script, edits and coaching, all of that kind of journey? What does that look like for the speakers you have at your event?
Yeah, so it's all of the above. As soon as somebody's selected, the training starts immediately. And so there's a lot of stuff on the front end just about brand standards, and you can do this, but don't do this, and you can say this, but don't say that, and stay away from this, and make sure on social media you're presenting things in this way, right? There's all of that stuff that happens. But then the really meat of it is helping them craft their talk and their idea. And we've got partners that help us do that. We use a public speaking company called Oratium. ran by a gentleman who actually was one of our inaugural TEDx Billings speakers. His name is Tim Pollard. If you have not seen his TEDx talk, you need to watch it. It's called Why Communication Fails and How to Fix It. It's probably one of the most crucial TEDx talks you can listen to as a person who presents information to other people, which we all do. So that means everybody should watch it. Anyway, him and his organization help us quite a bit, and we've got teams of other people that also help. So it's a mixture of everything. There's rough draft dates leading all up to it. I think there's 6 rough draft dates. There's a final draft date, and we're working with people hand in hand all along the way to steer them in the right direction and help them craft a talk that they can be proud of.
Mm. And how much time would you say this kind of process takes? I ask this for let's say, the business owner that they don't have, kind of like yourself, you're back to back calls all day, you're doing a lot of stuff that's all very important, and you're kind of having to face that decision of, yeah, I want to do a TEDx talk at some point in my life, but I just don't have the time. How much time does it take once they're already accepted at TEDx Billings of their time for the training, scripting, and of course, including even getting on stage the day of the event? What does that time look like?
Hmm. Again, I think that's going to be different for each person, right? Some people are going to be much more comfortable in this realm than others. And so if you're one of those people, you're going to probably put less time into it. Just kind of in general, for us, we select people early in the year in January, and then we notify them and we throw a big event here locally where they get recognized by the local media and things like that for being selected. And then it's, you know, this past year, our event happened in October. So from January to October, there's about 10 months basically in between, 9.5. So there's that amount of time in between when you get chosen and when you actually have to deliver the talk. And so if a person spaces out what they need to do over time, it could probably be a small amount of time, maybe an hour or so every week, every other week, just kind of looking at your craft, looking at your talk and crafting it and making edits and, rehearsing things like that. If you're a procrastinator, then it's going to take a lot of time at the back end. As far as like the trainings that we require, we would provide 2 to 3 different trainings on the actual presentations as far as like structure, presentation, delivery, stage etiquette, things like that. But then we've got other things that we provide that they can do just kind of like self-paced. And so I can't put a number on it, but what I can say for like a business owner that's thinking about it, if you're like super busy in your business and you're barely making it work there, or you've got 5 or 6 projects that might converge all at the same time in that same time period as the event that you're applying to is going to happen, and maybe apply to a different event or just wait until those projects are over or something, because we have had speakers pull out in the past because, there's 9 months that happened in between the event and they got busy in their personal lives and they had to pull out, which we understand. But if you can avoid that, obviously that's better for everybody. So, I would say that just take everything into account, take stock of where you're at in your business and in your life. And if you've got the space and the bandwidth to do it, then jump in feet first.
Mm. It seems like you get a lot of fulfillment out of helping these people get on the TEDx stage by finding them, setting the application process up and then training them or coaching them, whatever, verb you use to describe it. So my assumption is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you get a lot of satisfaction and fulfillment out of helping people get in the position on that stage to spread their idea that can change those lives. Which leads me to my next question is, you having all of this impact and all of this attention and this exposure that you help people get for their idea, how do you measure the impact and reach of your TEDx event and the talks and the impact that they have?
Hmm. Well, I guess the easy way to answer that is just the amount of people that show up and experience the event, the feedback that you get after the event happens, the feedback from your partners and just kind of the general consensus from your community is important. So that would be kind of one measure of success. And then of course, once the talks are thrown on YouTube and you see how they perform and how the world responds, of course that's another metric that you could consider for success. And so we of course look at all of those things, and we're proud of the success that we have had up to this point in the short amount of time that we've been doing it. But there's other ways to measure success, from the speakers who aren't necessarily as polished and who submit, have a great idea, and then have that mild freak out or imposter syndrome that you mentioned at the front end of the call, wondering if they're worthy, wondering if their talk really is good enough, and, having second thoughts on their ability to deliver that talk, and you coach them through the process and get them to the point where they walk across that stage and deliver their talk with the utmost confidence. I mean, to see a group of people go from that to what I just described at the end of delivering a successful talk, that's success as well. And so I think it just depends on who you are and how you measure it, but there's a few different ways in my eyes.
That's awesome. It sounds like it's incredibly qualitative, right? Because you can see, and more than see the impact, because if you could say you could see it, it could just say, oh, look at the amount of views on the YouTube thing. Whereas, kind of what you're saying is you can feel the energy in the room. You can
Mm,
see, but you can see when someone is impacted because of
mhm.
how it hits their physiology, is I guess what you could say. Or the feedback after the event. That makes a lot of sense. Last question here, because I know we're actually 3 minutes over, and I know you're probably on back-to-back calls all day, so I appreciate you taking this time here. Point proven, right? Uh, for some of the TEDx organizers I've talked to, they talked about, actually it was the TEDx Huntington Beach organizer. She was talking about how she's going into hibernation after her TEDx talk is organized and she's presented and everything. There was so much work. It was a passion project. Took so much of her time and energy. So for you, what does that look like for you as an organizer as far as your energy, your time, the fact it doesn't make any money directly for you? It's really just something that is so purely fulfillment for yourself and the people that it impacts focused and not monetarily focused. How do those decisions get made for you as a busy businessman where you're already doing so many other things? What goes into that just for you to continue every year when you do it?
Well, something that helps me is I've got a pretty large team of people that help me throw this thing. If I had a larger workload with it, I don't think that I would probably continue. So a big part of being able to do it long term is being able to assemble a team that can help you out. Because if I didn't have these people, yeah, I don't think that I would continue to do it. It's a lot. It's a lot, especially when you want to do it in a way that makes you proud and makes your community proud. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what I would say. I would tell the Huntington Beach organizer, go get a team, the people that you can trust, and don't be afraid to make that team a little bit bigger. If the few members you have are spread too thin, I find that a lot of people these days are excited about helping people spread ideas. And I think there's a general kind of consensus in human population that it's a good thing that we're sharing ideas and that we're talking. So you're going to be able to grow your team. You'll find your tribe and people that want to help. And that will help a lot with feeling ready to continue it. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that when I threw our when we threw our first event, I did have a little bit of that TEDx organizer hangover, is how I've heard it described. There's all this commotion and stuff happening leading up to the event, and then the event happens, and you literally just don't even want to think about it for a period of time. And that my first event, that's exactly what happened. I hadn't even thrown an event of that scale up to that point really ever. And so, going through that for the first time was stressful and had some learning experiences. Now that I went through that, added some more members to my team. I trust those team members. They're all on board for the mission. Now it's not as daunting. the events that have happened since then, I've not had that same hangover feeling. So build a team. It'll be worth it.
Mm. And just to confirm, I know I said that was the last question. If I can get a mini question, if that counts. Are you going to do TEDx next year? This is not, it wasn't your last one. You continue, you have no plan of stopping at this point?
Yeah, we're full steam ahead. We've
Awesome.
already closed applications for next year, so we're currently in the review process.
Awesome.
We will announce selections for next year's event in January sometime, and we're off and running. 2024 is going to be a fantastic year for us. There's a lot of really exciting things happening for TEDx Billings, and we're just excited to be a part of it.
Love it. Well, I'll wrap the recording up here. First, thank you so much for taking your time. I can hear your kids in the background saying, "Dada, we need you." And I get it, man. I appreciate you taking the time to, set aside from your kids. And I understand it's a very big ask. So I'm very appreciative of you choosing to make that decision to share your story and
Yeah,
kind of get a look under the hood for you TEDx organizers, right? Well,
yeah,
and
no, Ryan, this was fun. Thanks for inviting me on.